Welcome everyone to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter and I am a curator in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts in the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. I split my time with the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, which is a research and development institute within the Kislak Center that focuses on the study of manuscripts, both digital and physical. So we do a lot of digital humanities work, and we also have some pretty great collections of books on our shelves. And so for part of my work, once a week, I pull a book or sometimes more off the shelf and show them to you, just a little bit of a show and tell. I wasn't here last week because I was taking a class with the Rare Book School on Islamic manuscripts over at the Free Library of Philadelphia. And I had already planned to have this manuscript today because I knew that I was going to be coming fresh out of that class. And so I was really excited to see if I would learn something. And I did. I learned so much. I had such an amazing time and got my hands on a lot of different manuscripts. And I feel a lot more confident now working with Arabic script manuscripts. So I'm hoping that we're going to be having more of those on Coffee with the Codex, because we haven't really that much, mostly because I just haven't felt like it was something I was confident talking about. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Today's manuscript is it's LJS 435, and it is let me make sure I got the date right, 15th century manuscript written in Arabic, and it is a treatise on surgery, or parts of a treatise on surgery. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the work and who wrote it and when and why. But this manuscript it was written in AH 869, which would be 1464 in the Western calendar. And we don't know where it was written exactly. So let's see, more might come out of that. The binding is a typical, what we call a type 2 binding. Type 2 because it has a flap. So this was sort of a way to keep the book all together, kind of almost like its own little self-contained box. So a lot of Islamic manuscripts have this sort of flap here, and it does go under the cover. I've often seen them sort of over the cover. In fact, when I took this book out, it was over the cover, but no, it should be under. So I'm going to open this up and let's make sure it's nice and centered there. Here we go. And the flap likes to flip back, so I'm going to just put that there to keep it in place. All right. So it's made of paper, which is typical actually for manuscripts written in the Middle East and North Africa from about the 10th century. So they were using paper much earlier than in Europe. Once paper started being used in Europe after the rise of the printing press in the 15th century, you actually start to see paper being imported into the Middle East from Europe. And that's sort of interesting because the paper that was made locally has some different characteristics. Because of the way it's made, it tends not to have the kind of lines, the chain lines that you get in European paper. They also don't have watermarks. So when you start to see watermarks, that's when you're getting paper that's being imported from Europe. The paper that they were writing on in the Middle East and North Africa also was burnished. So I don't know if you can see this here, but it's quite shiny. And that's because of the way that the paper was treated before it was written on. Of course, this is after the printing press. I think this is local paper and not imported paper. So I'll let you look at this while I tell you a little bit about the text and who wrote it. So this is a very tiny portion of what was a much larger work. It was actually a 30-volume work, and it was written around the year 1000. So this was, I think that seems pretty early, right? So I'm gonna pause because somebody has sent me a direct message asking about no gloves. No gloves, clean, dry hands. Gloves can actually cause damage when you're working with books because you lose the tactility of your fingers. You can't feel, and so you can sometimes handle things more roughly than you should. The only time I've ever worn gloves was once I handled a book that had been the pages had been coated in white lead, and it could possibly have poisoned me. And so that's why I wear gloves. Otherwise, we don't wear gloves. So that's what that's about. So Claire is asking about the burnishing. I think it's like a hard, either a stone or probably wood, but something sort of heavy and very smooth. We saw some illustrations of paper making in some manuscript illustrations that we looked at last week, and they're sort of holding some kind of object that you sort of hold in your fist, and then there's this thing. But the instructor, whose name is Shreve Simpson, she said that she's never actually seen one like in a museum, so it's not entirely clear what it was, but it would have been something very smooth and somewhat heavy. There. All right. So the text that this is from, it was a 30-volume work, and it was written by a medical practitioner, a doctor, I guess, called Albucasis, is his westernized name. And he was about in his early 60s when he wrote this. And he had been a practicing physician and a practicing surgeon for, like at least 40 years by this point. And it was basically him writing out all of his knowledge that he had learned in his lifetime as a medical practitioner. In addition to surgery, there were sections on medicine, midwifery, pharmacology, therapeutics, dietetics, psychotherapy, and medical chemistry. So all kinds of stuff that he wrote in this 30-volume work. The surgical portion is from the last volume, and there are 3 chapters. And this is 2 of those chapters. So the first chapter, I think this is actually the end of the first chapter. And then the rest of it is gone. I don't know where it is. But this is the start of the second chapter. And let's see. So it starts here. This was interesting to me. This read, if we look, we'll go to the next few pages. Every section, so the chapter or the volume is divided into chapters. And this is a chapter and this is a chapter. Each chapter has this red heading, rubric. And so at first it's like, oh, here's the rubric for this chapter. It's actually the Bismillah, which you also see in the Quran at the start of every surah in the Quran. And it basically is saying, let me see, I looked it up, what exactly it means. But it's a very common, it sort of means in the name of Allah. And what you're saying is, I am starting something in the name of Allah. And I thought it was interesting that this chapter actually starts with that line. So immediately, the thing that's so interesting about this this text is the illustrations of the surgical tools here. So we immediately start to see the surgical tools. And as you can see in the links that Amy has kindly put in, I actually found a translation of the work. So we don't just have to look at these surgical things and think sort of, oh, some of them are pretty scary actually, but we don't have to concentrate on that. We can actually see what these are for. So book 2 is on incision, perforation, and venesection or bloodletting, and wounds and the like. So this chapter is sort of about how you deal with cutting as opposed to other things. So chapter 1, which is where we are, is on the cure of hydrocephalus, which is, he starts out saying, this disease occurs most commonly in infants upon delivery when the midwife grasps the child's head roughly. So these are the tools that you would then use. I won't read what he says about how you do that, but that's what these tools are for. So we keep moving, and as we go, you'll see the occasional note in the margin. So it seems to me that this is a book that if people weren't actually they probably didn't have it next to them as they were doing surgery. There's no indication of that, but people were reading the text and interacting with it. So here are some more tools. Let's see. I won't stop for every one of them, but maybe the first few we can see. So this is in the section on the extraction of the temporal arteries. So if a man has a chronic migraine or a violent chronic headache, then you can treat them with these tools, that's kind of interesting. All right. So I think at this point, I may sort of move through, and if you see something that looks particularly interesting, we can pause. There are something like 200 illustrations in the book, which is a lot. It's pretty well documented. When I was doing my bit of research, I did discover that the illustrations, there are several other copies of this manuscript that survive. In particular, there are a couple at the Bodleian Library, and the translation that I cited there has reproductions of some of them, and there are two manuscripts, and the illustrations are actually very different in each one. They're both, even though it seems like they're the same instrument, the way that they are drawn are very different. And one of them has illustrations that are very similar to this manuscript, which makes me wonder if there might be some copying going on. And so I want to go back and see that. So Novella pointed out the marginalia here, and so I thought I'd come back and show this. Yes, this was clearly something that was very interesting, and I'm going to see if I can find, let's see if I can find in my translation what exactly that is. One thing that was interesting for me last week, looking at all of these books that were very new to me, is seeing how the different ways that people interacted with the books, that in some ways were very similar, but in other ways were quite different. So for example, we're used to seeing marginalia and notes written in the margins, but in the Islamic manuscripts, it's the marginal notes tend to be written diagonally like this. And sometimes you'll even see ruling in the margin. So it's actually ruled ahead of time, and then you go in and you'll, diagonal writing this way and then this way. And so this is a very typical sort of thing to see. It's less, I didn't see so much of the sort of straight up and down or the, vertically, but the diagonal is really, let's see, am I lost? I really wanted to see what this was, because this is pretty, somebody was clearly, okay, I think I found it. So this is the section on turning a fistula in the nose. So if you have a nose, I guess a tumor or something in your nose, this is the instrument that you would use that. And maybe someone had something to add there in the margin. Let's see. So Barbara's asking what the chemical contents of the red and black ink. The black ink is probably iron gall ink. I think that tended to be the ink that was used both in Europe and in the Middle East and Northern Europe, or some kind of iron ink. The red I'm not sure about. There's a lot of red. Is Amy still there? It looks like Amy turned her camera off. She might know more about the red ink, but I'm not really sure. It also looks like here that these have been labeled. I think that these are sort of labels of like what the instruments are called, which is sort of interesting. And then a whole bunch of, I want to see what these are. Yeah, Amy says she doesn't know about the red ink, so I don't know. Let's see. These are quite interesting, all of these. All right. Oh, on the extraction of teeth. So here is our section on extracting teeth. So it probably makes sense that you'd have like a lot of little different instruments like that. I am actually going to the dentist tomorrow, and that's probably not that different from what we see at our dentist these days. Let's see. Oh, and here are actually a little diagram of teeth. Again, we've got our little, I think those are like little descriptions of which teeth are which. There. Let's see. So the first chapter is I think gone. There are also sections that are missing within the chapter. I noticed this because I was trying to go through to make sure, oh, there's some nice marginalia there. Trying to go through to sort of get ready to, know that I knew where things were. And I noticed that there were many more illustrations in the translation than there are in our manuscript, and it's because there are whole sections, huge, many leaves that are missing, and I would assume it's because there have been quires that are pulled out, like whole folded booklets that were taken out, rather than because there aren't any stubs or anything. It doesn't look like pages were cut out. It looks like it was probably disbound, and then parts were either taken out or were lost, or maybe someone took them out to use them. It is really hard to say about that. So I got curious about these because there were all of these instruments. And this section is chapter 46 on the shapes of the instruments used for incising and perforating. So this is sort of an overview of all the different kinds of instruments that you might use to cut or poke, I guess. So that's why all of these are sort of laid out in this way. I did notice that there were sort of repetitions between, I've been seeing this sort of similar looking instruments over and over again, and maybe that's why. So let's see, a couple questions. Cheryl asks, are any of the illustrations anatomical diagrams? Not that, so there was the teeth. I think that's the only one that I've seen is the teeth. Mostly it's surgical instruments, and sort of the text is describing how to use them. There might be some, we'll see when we go through. Amy is asking me, am I going to do the collation? So she's asking if I'm going to look at the structure and build a model of the structure of the book, which is something that I like to do. I think I would like to do that, Amy. My software, I have software that we use to do that. And unfortunately, it's designed for Western books. So you sort of have, But you can still make a model. It's just backwards. I might do it just to see, because I would like to see how this, if it's really like full choirs that are missing, that would be the way to see that. Another thing that I learned, if you look down here on the bottom, so because this is, we're reading it right to left, this is the recto, and this is the verso of the page. And you'll see these catchwords on here. However, the practice, unlike in Europe, where the practice was to put catchwords at the end of a choir, in these Islamic manuscripts, you have catchwords on every single page, which is sort of to help make sure that the pages are all in order. It's the little word, and it's the first word of the next page. So even though I can't read Arabic, maybe you can read Arabic, but I can tell from looking at these letter forms that that is the same as that. So I know there's nothing missing. And I did see that there's definitely something missing in that earlier section because, here it is. Here's where it's missing. Because the catchword does not actually line up with whatever is at the top. So this is where we had a big section missing in chapter 2. In fact, at chapters 55 through the first half of chapter 77. So we're going from 55 to 77 here. And then we have some more of this. Let's see. Barbara asks the date of the binding. Let me take a look. I'm not sure what the binding date is. Binding. There is no indication in the record of the date of the binding. I think it's not original, but one of the reasons I think it's not original is because there's missing sections. I'm not good at dating any binding, let alone a binding from I'm saying Middle East and North Africa. It could also be Spain. In fact, the author of the text was from Spain, Albucasis. He was from a village near Cordoba in southern Spain. And we can also have a peek at the spine in a minute, sure. Let's see. Let's keep going. So we're at more of these fantastic ones. Here, for some reason, there's the paper is different. There's a few pages of this sort of orange paper. I don't know if that is because it's acidic or I think it's just a darker color, and I don't know why. And it's strange. See, Amy, this would be another good reason to do the collation because I'm not sure why it is in this way. So there's a leaf, and then there's another leaf, and then we have 2 leaves. So maybe this is the middle of the choir, and then these would be attached to each other, and then these would be, maybe that's what's happening. It would be attached. So it's like sheets of different colored paper have been folded together to make a choir. I think that's what's happening. So that's sort of interesting. That answers that question. I don't know why they have this other paper or why it's that color. Let's see. There's another section that's missing here. Here we go. Stay there. But I didn't have time to see exactly which chapters were missing. But there's something there. This is sort of interesting. It looks like somebody came in later with a slightly lighter brown and made some kind of diagram. Maybe that's, I don't know. I don't know what that could be. I'm assuming it's something relevant to this particular tool. But that is kind of an interesting example of somebody coming in and sort of using the book for whatever they need it for. Let's see. Novella. I just noticed that the accents on the red words are in black ink. Do I know why? Oh, yeah. I assume you're talking about these accents here. Yeah. I don't know why. It could be that all of the text was written. So what order would that go in? So the main text would be written, and they'd probably leave space for the rubric. And then the rubric was written, and then maybe they came in and somebody added the accents later, and they just didn't want to switch. That would be my guess, but it's only a guess as to why that's happening. So it looks like somebody decided they didn't like this, and so they struck through. And there's another strike through here, it looks like. Strike through being like erasing it, like ignore this. And I don't know why. I guess it was done at 2 different times. Maybe the person who did the rubrication made this. Oh, can you see? That's red there. Oh, and more of this sort of orange paper. So we're still in book 2. So let's go ahead because we only have a few minutes. So here is where book 3 is beginning somewhere here. There's no big heading. I was sort of hoping there'd be some kind of big heading or maybe another Bismillah, but there's not. But I know from counting the sections and from looking at the illustrations that this is where those chapters are being. So the rest of this is chapter 3, which is, let's see what chapter 3 is. Where is chapter 3? Oh dear. This is 91. Chapter 3 is on bone setting. So there are illustrations of bones, I think. So not quite anatomical, whoever was asking about anatomical, but I'm pretty sure that that is a bone, or it's supposed to be a bone. This is much shorter than the previous one. And let's see. As I'm looking through this, let's see. The script, I think, is Naskh script, which is sort of the typical, I'll say a lot of our manuscripts are written in Naskh script. But I'm wondering if maybe this was copied in Spain. See, I'm getting way over my head. Ignore that. Forget I said anything. But last week I looked at a manuscript that I thought was written in a what's called the maghribi script, which is the script of Spain and North Africa. And I was told, no, it was Naskh, but it was influenced by it. So I'm getting the same sort of vibe here. I run on vibes too much. Let's see. I was hoping for more bone cutting, but that might be it. Let's see. There are more marginal notes here. And, ooh, here we go. So this is maghribi script. It's a little bit more, I don't know, it's very round. So if it wasn't written, it was at least read by someone who was maybe from that area. Because I had to keep reminding myself that, in fact, the area, the geographical area where people wrote using Arabic script is an enormous, ranges all the way from Spain into the east. Ooh, that is interesting. All right, maybe for one last, it is 12:30, but one last thing. Let's see if we can see what this thing might be. Towards the end. Let's see. Oh, right there. That's right. I'll do that. So this is on the treatment of dislocation of the spinal vertebrae. There we go. And yes, we'll take a look at the spine. Go back to you. And let's see. So here is the top of the spine where there is no end band. I don't know if you can see that really well. Yeah. And then that's the same on the bottom. Oop. There we go. Yvonne, the writing on the brown pages is consistently either by a heavier hand or the paper bleeds. I'm guessing it's the same. I think it's probably the same hand. So the paper did not feel the same. It didn't feel as well. It may be that it was not burnished as much. It's the burnishing, I think, that helps keep the ink from bleeding. And so it may be that it was treated not as well, but maybe they needed to use it up, and so they had it. All right, it's time to end. This was really fun for me. I hope this was good for you as well. And we'll be back next week to look at an 18th century Latin copy of the Key of Solomon. So if that sounds fun, I hope you'll join us. Thank you.